Uh, Good evening, everybody, and thank you for being here. I hope it's been a wonderful day for everybody who's attended the VFX Summit at India Joy this year. My name is Sharom Yastigati, and I'm with the Adobe 3D and Immersive team. Uh, I lead some of the sales and customer-facing roles for them in India. I wanted to welcome everybody to today's session. With me, I have my colleague Kirtan Satya, who's a senior technical artist at the Adobe 3D and Immersive division. He's going to be conducting a hands-on workshop today on some of the tips and tricks used in VFX workflows surrounding Substance, Painter, and some of the other applications. So, without further ado, I'm going to let Kirtan take over. And in case anybody has any questions or comments, concerns, I'll be right there in the chat. So please feel free to drop your questions and comments in the chat. Thank you. Over to you, Kirtan.
Thank you, Sharon. So let me quickly share my screen first. I think you guys would be able to see my screen now. Sorry for some technical glitch. Okay, I welcome you all for the session on tips and tricks for VFX and the workflow for VFX. First of all, I'm Kirtan. I'm a senior technical artist at Adobe 3D and I division. So prior to Adobe, I used to work with a film production called Film Tree Studios and also other companies like Target, Boston Consulting Group as such. So highly specialized in implementing Substance into the 3D pipeline and also up-leveling the texturing quality for the division. So that's the core experience what I have. And you can find me on Behance or ArtStation as well as on LinkedIn. So before starting, like what is Adobe Substance 3D? So I would like to keep it short, so because most of them would already know what is Adobe Substance. So basically, Adobe Substance 3D is a collection of smart creative apps. All right. So it's a collection of smart creative apps and high-end content. It gives you everything you need to make some inspiring art from. It may be from beginner level to expertise level. So today we offer Adobe Substance 3D Painter. It's our core tool where most of the VFX people use this. So basically it is like a 3D Photoshop. You can go and start painting on your 3D models right away inside Substance Painter. So Substance Painter can do much more things. Like it's not just painting some small textures on the object. It also can do a lot of micro details like adding scratches, adding stitches or anything as such in the level of details. So that's the core tool what we have in our lineup. And also we do have something called Adobe Substance 3D Designer. This is our main tool, like it's a technical tool where it is used to create some filters, some procedural materials. Whatever materials you see on our library are all created using Substance Designer. Most of them, if it is not all, most of them are created using Designer in procedural way. So that's the high specialty of the tools what we have today. And also recently we added something called Sampler. This is a next gen tool where it is used to create textures in specific way. For example, if you're an artist, if you don't like to use some technical tools, you can use Sampler to create the material out of one single bitmap. If you have a bitmap, you can drag and drop inside Sampler, and you can quickly create a material, tileable material out of it using the filters available inside Sampler. Or if you're not happy with the workflow, you can also use some scan-based workflow in Sampler or some AI which is there inside Sampler to create some tileable materials out of it. So finally, we have a tool called Stager. It's a young tool, which is almost like 6 months old, and it's a beautiful tool to stage your scenes. For example, if you have a scene and if you want to showcase in a portfolio, of course, like you can use Stager, you can quickly stage the scene and you can do some lighting, environment lighting, or much more things over there, like using the collision and all. You can prepare the staging or the scene much more nicer and faster way. So in today's demo, we will be looking at a main tool called Substance 3D Painter. So that is the go-to tool for when we come to the VFX industry. So like, let us try to explore quite a few things in Substance Painter. So due to the time limit, we won't be exploring each and every detail and each and every tools what we have, but mainly we will focus only on Substance 3D Painter today. So let me quickly launch Substance Painter. All right. So now I have Substance 3D Painter open. So this is how the interface look. So first of all, if I want to create a project, all I have to do is just go to File, Create New, and here you have a Create New window. So here there are quite a few options to create a project. First of all, since we are focusing on VFX industry, we would like to uh, create a project using UV tile workflow. So for example, if in case if you want to create your project using the UV tile workflow, you have to enable this option. If it is disabled, then you will not be having the capability of painting across to UTIMs. It will fall to the legacy mode like how we had texture sets. So once I enable this, again, here we do have two options. Like the first one is exactly the UDIMS workflow. Like you can paint across the UV tiles, or if in case you have multiple UV tiles, and if you want to use that multiple UV tiles as each individual texture sets, then you can actually use this option. So that will fall to the legacy mode, and it gives you an option to go, texture according to your requirement. But for this session, I would be using the UV tile workflow. Apart from that, whenever you're importing a mesh, you can also import cameras along with that. So if in case if you have a FBX exported from any other TCC tool and it has some camera attributes or camera angles, like you can of course import those cameras as well using this. And also we included some auto UV unwrap feature. So at this point of time, I won't be using auto unwrap feature because I have cleanly unwrapped manually, and we can use those UVs in this project. And also, at not lastly, like it is a resolution of the document. So, for example, like if you want to upscale the resolution, you can of course go and upscale the resolution. So I won't touch upon any other options over here. Just go and select the mesh which I require. So I will just go and select this asset, and I will click OK. So now I have set the project settings, and I will just quickly click OK. So as soon as I click OK, you can see my Substance is actually loading the asset, and it actually loads right inside my viewport. So you can see that I have an asset here. It is, of course, quite a good quality. It has millions of polygons. It's of production quality. So I have just minimized the scene here so that it goes smooth in the live demo. So basically, you could see some rocks and a tree and also a ground. So let us try to texture this using this UV dims. So before starting any project, what I would like to do is I would like to bake textures. So, for example, to bake the texture set, like additional, the settings, like what you can do is you can go to this texture set settings, and also you can bake those additional maps which is required. So I will just go to this bake additional maps, bake mesh maps. Here we have quite a few options like normal, world space, normal ID, ambient occlusion, curvature, each everything. So for this demo, I will just deselect everything. I will just enable only occlusion, not everything. And I will just come to this occlusion properties. If in case if you want to make some adjustments, of course we can do the adjustments, but I'm going to leave it is. I will just increase the resolution to 2K, and also scroll down and probably have an anti-aliasing for sampling 2x2. So now I have set this bake settings, and also you can make a decision. So if you want to bake all the textures, all the UV tiles or specific UV tiles, you can of course make that decision. But for this project, since I have just demonstrating only occlusion, I'm just going to bake selected texture sets, textures. So because I have already selected each of them. So as soon as I hit, you can see my Substance Painter is actually baking all those additional maps which is actually required. So now you could see it is much more faster. We have refined the baking technique, what it undergoes in the backend, and the process is much more faster now, and also it gives much more better result when compared to the previous version of Substance Painter. So there you go. So now the baking is all done. So I'll just click OK. So what I'm going to do is, since I need those additional maps, I have already baked those maps and created a file. So let me quickly open up a file with all those baked. All right, so let me open that file. So there you go. So now I have opened the same file, but only change what I have done is I have baked all those additional maps so that I have some time to explain few tips and tricks. So here you can see I have baked all the additional maps like normal, wall space, and also you can see the number 27. So the number 27 means that your project actually has 27 UV tiles across. So in order to make sure if it has a 27 UV tiles or not, so let us come here to my scene, and I have one single texture set that is scene underscore empty, and I have UV tiles. I have 27 UV tiles across. So let me split my view here to 2D view and the 3D view. You can see here I have UV tiles across this. So overall, I have 27 UV tiles. So this is what UV tiles workflow is. So now, without doing some changes or going ahead with texturing, I will just try to emphasize few more user experience here. So first of all, you can see the number 1001, 1002. So those information was always present here. If in case if you're not happy with that, if you want to switch it off, you can go ahead and switch it off. At this point of time, we have just included only UDIM numbers, but in further, like in future, like we may add little more information like what color space it use or what color depth it use. So those kind of information can be added, but the team is actually deciding what should be added over there. So that's the simple feature which will be handy once you zoom out, and if you don't want to see this number quickly, you can go and switch it off. All right. Now, let's talk about the resolution. So I have created the document in 1K resolution. So let's texture set settings, and you can see the whole document and all the UV textures are in 1K. So if in case, if you're not happy, you can of course go and upscale the resolution. Overall, my whole project becomes 2K, and it'll be nice to see in the viewport. If in case, if you don't want, you can switch back to 1K at any point of time. All the strokes, all the materials, what you have created, Painter will automatically downsize it and upscale the resolution accordingly. And also, since I'm using this UV tiles, for some reason, I wanted to use some specific UV tiles in low resolution and some specific UV tiles in higher resolution. So that also possible. So as soon as you come here and select each individual texture sets, UV tiles, or hold shift and select this UV tiles. And if you come back to this texture set settings, see that all the other options were there is grayed out. It is no more visible, and only texture set size is actually visible. That means you have selected multiple UV tiles and you are ready to set the resolution for only those UV tiles. So for now, what I can do, I can go ahead and change the texture set resolution to 2K. So now once I come out and if I select the other texture sets, you can see that the texture size will be 1K, but for the rest would be 2K since I have made that way. So if in case if you don't want, always you can fall back to texture set size. So also, whenever you're working with multiple UV tiles, for example, here in the 2D view, you can see here from 1001 to 1008. These are the texture sets which is actually a part of this ground. So since I wanted to make things easier, what I can do is I can just go to here and I can select all those texture sets. And I can come to this texture set settings, and in the description, I will just simply add some comment like ground. So once I come out of it, you can see those texture sets are actually named as ground. So it'll be easy for me to understand what texture set stands where. So if it is ground, if it is rock, it will be easy to identify. That way, you can add some additional information over here to identify the texture sets and speed up the texturing process. So that's a quick overview on the texture sets. The UV tiles. So what we will do is we will just come back to my 3D view here. So let us zoom in. So firstly, what I will do, I will just simply create a paint layer here. So I won't do much changes here. So for example, like here, if I scroll down, for the color, I will just take red. And I have access to the brush. I will just make some small changes to the brush. And I will start painting across this UV tiles. You can see as soon as I paint, it is actually painting across the UV tiles. So let us split my view here. And you can see those strokes is actually distributed among those texture sets wherever I actually painted. So for example, if you want to paint it on this across the UV tiles using 2D viewport, of course, could be done. So this way, you can actually paint across the UV tiles and have seamless workflow in Substance Painter. So far, so good. Like what I've done is I've just painted one single channel. So that is a color channel. So what if in case if you want to add multiple channels, of course it is possible. So let me quickly create a new paint layer here. So this time what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select a material. So as soon as I select a material, you can see my like I have enabled color channel, height information, as well as roughness channel and metalness, as well as normal if in case if I want. So now I can also paint those multiple channels at the same time. So for example, I will just quickly zoom in. I will just make some small adjustments to the brush. If I want to follow the path, let me quickly follow the path and start painting right on top of that. So now as soon as I paint, you can see it actually paint across the UV tiles, and also it is painting all the channels in real time. So for example, color, height, roughness, as well as metal. So this way you have control on painting on every channel. Like if in case if you're not happy with the material and if you want to disable the height information, you can of course do it and paint only the color, roughness as required. So seamlessly it is working fine. So let us try to go ahead and start texturing the scene. So that is how those painting across UDIMs work. So let me quickly delete this layer and let me come to the smart material. So basically I have just created some smart materials for this demonstration purpose. So I'll just come to the smart material. So here I have a rock material. I will just simply drag and drop right into the scene. So as soon as I drop right into the scene, my Substance Painter is taking quite a lot of time to actually give me the result. The reason is because you're adding the texture on all the texture sets what you have in the scene. So you can see I have created a smart material, or a material if you have, you can drag and drop, and it actually applies on the whole UV tiles where you have. So in order to speed up the process, like to be efficient, to have a to use this graphics memory in very efficiently, what we can do is, rather than dragging and dropping the whole material and creating a mask, what we can do is we can also make use of color IDs. So for example, here I will just wanted to drag and drop the material only for this particular rock. So while dragging and dropping, just hold control, you will get all the color IDs and drop in specific color IDs where you want. For example, if I drop it into this, so wherever you have that particular color ID will be applied with this material. So now we can see that computation became much more faster and much more smoother. So that way you can be mindful when you're dragging and dropping the textures, when you're applying the materials onto the UDIM scene. All right, so here I have a rock textured. So let us try to figure out another way how we can be more efficient. So now I will just quickly go here and create a new folder and name this as rocks. So now I have a rocks folder. Now, rather than using the color ID, this time what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go and select this particular box. As soon as I select, you can see here it comes to this geometry mask. So here I'm in UV tiles mode, and you can make a decision where you want to apply this materials which is inside this particular folder. So what I will do, I wanted to apply the material of this folders only to this particular rocks. So in order to do that, I will just go ahead and deselect all the UV tiles. So as soon as I deselect all the UV tiles, you can see my viewport is completely black. So that means this particular folder doesn't have any kind of UV information. I mean to say that, so you have not selected any UV tiles. So in order to make a selection, I can hover my mouse right inside my 3D viewport. Or if you're not happy that, you can come to your 3D viewport, 2D viewport, and you can also make a selection here. Or if you have named your UV tiles in specific way, you can also go and select in this drop down list. So what I'm going to do to make things easier, I will just come to this viewport. I will just start selecting this particular rock. So now I have selected two different UV tiles and it is actually selected. So you can see here, it actually selected 1026 and 1036. That is where this UV information is actually present. All right, so now what we did is we actually created a folder, and we also added a UV tile mask. As soon as we add a UV tile mask for this folder, you can see here, I have a small grid that represents that you have used a UV tile mask, and the number 2 says that you have selected 2 UV tiles. So now with that, what I can do is I can straight away drag and drop a material right inside that folder. So now material you apply and whatever changes you make, that will be applied only on those 2 UV tiles which we actually selected. So those are 1026 and 1036. Of course, we can do the modifications whenever we require. If you want to add more UV tiles, we can go ahead and add it. If you want to remove some of them, we can also remove it at any point of time. So now you can see I have just dragged and dropped some of smart material right on top of this rock. So let us quickly visualize like what I have done to the smart material. So let us expand and let me switch off all these materials and come one by one. So here For the base material, what I have used is I have just used a simple material from my library. Substance Painter offers a lot of materials inside the library. It ships with a lot of material. You can make use of it, or you can also go to Asset Store and you can download some procedurally created materials. They are really high end and they are really procedural, and it is good to use in the production. So that is the base material which I have used. And also I have added an anchor point. So as soon as I add an anchor point, what happens, all those information what I have in this material will be copied onto this anchor point. Later, we can use this anchor point as a chain. So now I have added another one layer, just added a little bit of here and there, like a little bit of color variation. That is a bright colors as well as darker colors, just using the mask builder. You can see this is how the mask builder works, and I have just used a little bit blur and also mask builder properties to get that mask out. So now for the moss, what I have done, interestingly, we have a lot of generators. Like for example, if you go here, so everything is black. So what I have done is I've just added 3D linear gradient. Also, you can use position map to get only the top portion of the object. So here I have just used the linear and also added a little bit of clouds and used a multiply mode and added a little bit of blue noise to that so that I will get that grainy feel, which we will always see in the moss, and also a little bit of levels adjustments here and there. And finally, the little bit of material property. So that's how I have got some of the moss applied only on top of this surface. So good to go. So now what we have done is we have dragged and dropped one of the smart material. We have looked into how the smart material is behaving and how we have created. So let us go and actually apply some of the materials for the tree as well. So even before applying the material, what I would like to do is I will just quickly create a folder outside and I will name this as tree. Now, whatever materials I want to apply inside this should be applied only on top of this tree. So in order to do that, I will just mask properties. This time, rather than using the UV tiles, because I have multiple number of UV tiles for this tree, I will quickly go and change the UV tile mask. That's a mask type to mesh names. So how your artist actually prepares the asset using the elements, name of the elements, in the same way it will be actually seen in Substance Painter. So here you can see, I easily notice these are all the tree elements. So I will just exclude everything and I will quickly enable only those tree elements. So now what has happened is I've created a mask using the geometries, what we have actually created rather than using the UV tiles. And also it works exactly like the UV tiles. And if I come to UV tiles, you can see all those UV tiles are actually enabled. So this gives you leverage and also ease of use. Like if you want to use UV tiles, if you have hundreds of UV tiles, you can use it. Or if you have, if you're fine to use UV tiles, you can also fall back to the mesh names and you can quickly select those mesh and it will be easy to mask it out. So now we have done with those masks. So here you can see the icon has actually changed to the small cube. So that means you have used mask type is actually a mesh, not a UV tile. So now it's good to go and start texturing. So this time, rather than dragging and dropping some of the smart materials, what I'm going to do is I'm just quickly create a paint and I'll try to add some micro details. So Painter is actually specialized in this one. Like you can add micro details like scratches on the metal or stitches on the fabric or little bit of bark details on the trees or some other details on the rocks. So for this tree, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and remove the material what I had. I will just only enable height. I will add a little bit of height information and come to my brush properties and probably like a brush preset, which I have already created. So once I create, of course, I have access to this brush. So now I can go ahead and start painting right on top of this and add those tiny extra details which we actually want. So now let me quickly go ahead and start painting right on top of the surface. So let us take quite a few seconds here. I will just randomly draw some strokes, not precise. You can spend a lot of time here to make things much more perfect, nicer and cleaner. But due to the time limit, I'm just going to add strokes randomly without any cleanliness. Okay, so that works fine. So here you can see, as soon as I start painting, I'm finding difficulty because this has actually come in coming in between the view, so they're actually distracting. I cannot reach to those particular corner of this tree. So in order to make things easier, I can actually ignore the geometries which I have not masked. For example, this rocks are not a part of this particular folder where we have masked. So as soon as I click on this icon, it actually removes everything and give you a way to paint much more nicer. So now I can access to every corner of this tree and start painting right on top of the surface. All right, so let me quickly increase the size so that the things get faster here. I will just quickly add a few more strokes here, right on top as well. I will just adjust the light to see if everything is fine to go. So this way we can actually add those micro details what we want onto the object. So for example, now what I'm going to do is I'm just quickly going to drag and drop one of the smart material what I have created again for this tree right inside this folder. So as soon as I add this right inside that folder, what happens, it only computes on those texture sets. So again, I have spent quite a bit of time for this one and created some detailed texturing for this tree. So let us look into it, like how this tree has been textured. So let us expand all those textures and let us disable most of them, and let's enable one by one to see what exactly we have done. So first of all, the micro details what we have done. So for example, we have added this tiny bark details onto this particular object. Whenever we see whenever we want to do the texturing, like we need to see a lot of reference to understand like how things should come out. So based on the reference what I have worked on, so we could see trees with the bark wherever some of the barks will be peeled off, and you can see some smooth wood in those areas. So in order to get that feel, I have added another one tiny detail here and removed those bark details and made this geometry a little more smoother. You can see that. So now I have chipped off or peeled some of the barks right out of this particular area. And also you can see this masks what I have created also has an anchor point. So that means whatever mask you have created will be copied onto this anchor point. So you can reuse this mask on above layers. So whenever it is required. So I tend to use a lot of anchor points, which will be very much efficient and very much useful when you're doing those changes when required. For example, if you make any changes for this mask, it automatically applies onto all the channels or all the places where you have reference this anchor points. So that is how I have added the tiny details that we call micro details on top of this tree. And for the texturing, what I've done, I have just added a base material on top of this. So in order to get a proper wood feel, I've just added a simple wood material right on top of this. This again, it is a metal which we have, you can get it from the asset store. It is a procedural metal. You can, of course, change the color at any point of time, and you can make some changes according to your requirements. So for example, if I want to change the color, you can come here and change the color at any point of time. So now, in order to add some color variations, of course, like when we tend to see everything in the real world, nothing is perfect. It has some kind of dust, dirt, or dents, or whatever it is. So those are the tiny details which actually make things look much more photorealistic. So whenever you're texturing, you have to give eye for detail. So you all should also give importance to those details like dirt or dents or scratches or those kind of things. So for example, here I've just added a tiny detail here for that wood, smooth wood, which I don't wanted the same texture to be used. So what I have done is I have used a different texture. And again, this is also a procedural material. At any point of time, we can actually make changes to that color. So, and also here you can see this actually mask is actually referenced from the mask which we actually created in a high detail. So whenever you make changes to this peel effect, which is in the bottom, it actually reflects right on top of it. So now, as soon as we create this tiny detail, so let me quickly change this color back to a little more darker. All right, that works fine. And here for the dirt, I have just added a little more dirt right on top of this, wherever the bark occlusion feel is there. Like I just added a tiny bit of dirt, and also another set of tiny dirt which I have added right on top of this tree, so that it looks much more natural. So as soon as I add those things, also when I was looking into this reference, like I found a lot of moss on the trees. So that is how the tropical region will be like. You can, so since I was working on this scene for a tropical region, so I thought like adding those moss would be a nicer idea. So what I have done, I have just added those tiny details like moss, and also you can see those moss. Sorry, the moss details, the mask which I have created here is actually created in very easy way. Like for example, I have just used the mask builder and used the position just to select only the top area which is actually facing upwards, so that only that area will have those moss. So when we see underneath, most of the areas are black. So that's how I have selected only the areas which is actually facing upwards. And also I've just added those bark details again using the anchor point. So just I can subtract those things, and also adjusted a little bit of tiny bit of levels, and added a little bit of variation so that I will not have uniformity in this moss, and added some tiny bit of noise, some white noise here. You can see I have added some white noise, and also a little bit of sharpen to get that nicer grainy feel to that moss. So that's how I have created the moss mask. And also the same way I have created another variation here. So you can see I have another one variation with a different color. So all I have just used the hue saturation and just adjusted the moss color. Of course, like if it is a procedural material, you can also go and select, change the color right from this drop down list, color selection list, sorry. So that's how I created a moss, and that's how the tree has actually been textured. So far, what we have done is we have created some tiny details for the tree, and also dragged and dropped some of the textures right on top of this tree. So let us come back. So let us switch off this and enable all those elements in the scene. So now the scene is actually looking good and nice. So for example, if in case if you're not happy with the performance of the machine, for example, if you don't have higher end graphic cards or anything as such, Substance Painter will by default actually, so let me come back to my UV tiles here. All right. So here you can go to this display settings, and you can find those settings here. So for example, by default, it will be on the lighter side. The map BIOS will be on the lighter side. If you're using higher end graphic cards, you can of course go to the higher result, for example, medium, soft, or sharp. So that way you can have a better performance if you have a better graphic card. So for example here, so I have all the channels. I can switch to the base color, I can switch to the metalness, or you can also switch to additional maps like curvature. So you can see that as soon as I switch to those curvature or thickness, my Substance Painter is actually loading those maps on demand. So as soon as I click, only then those maps are actually loaded. So that is keeping the mind in performance. We have done that. That is obvious. It has to be happen like that, because to save a lot of memory in your graphic card, so that whenever you're looking into the materials or any additional maps, there is a lot of data which is transferred from your uh, the hard disk to graphic card, or graphic memory to CPU as such. So in order to keep the performance in mind, we have done that. So that is obvious. It's not a bug or something like that. It should be fine. So if you want to have a better result, if you have a better quality graphic card, so like I said, we can of course go to the map BIOS, and you can actually change the settings according to your requirement. But I'm going to leave it as it is. And also, one more thing which we need to do is, whenever you're working on the larger scene, you have to be mindful on the hard disk what you have. For example, if you have a traditional hard disk like 7200 rpm per minute, like a mechanical hard disk, so that actually might not perform better when you have larger scenes. So in order to tackle those things, you can have SSD hard disks in place, so where things get much more faster. And also you can come to the settings, and here in the settings you can see those cache budget. We have actually you can actually set those cache budget according to your requirement. You can increase more. If in case if you don't have a better graphic card with more memory, then what happens is like all those details or all those data will be actually transferred right on top of your hard disk. So if it is a solid state drive, the performance becomes much more nicer. So that's how we can actually make changes to your performance. You can increase the budget of this cache and also make sure that the temp directory location will be off on the SSD what you're using. So very important to have those settings on your machine. So also on this right hand side corner, you can see this cache disk usage. So it is of 74%. So try to have an eye on that. If in case if you're hitting almost like close to 100%, yeah, then you need to increase your cache or you need to have more space in your hard disk. So better to make changes accordingly before crashing it or losing the file and making it not usable. So those are the performance part and also keeping things in mind. So now the only thing which is pending in the scene is the ground actually. So I wanted to apply some of the materials for this ground or bitmaps, which I had actually textured. For example, I had actually created the textures or painted the textures in some other application, and I have those texture maps actually. So what I want to do is I just wanted to reuse those rather than doing a texturing in Substance Painter, everything from scratch. So let me quickly open up this folder. Here you can see I have all those textures which is actually painted. You can see I have multiple UV tiles base color as well as height information as well as some roughness information over here. So what I can do is I will just select all of this, drag and drop right into my shelves, and I will define this as a texture because it is actually a texture, and import this into my project. So as soon as I import, you can see you will get only 3 channels. So for example, one is base color and height as well as roughness. And also you can see it says 8. So 8 means that you have 8 UV tiles across. Substance Painter is so intelligent. It understands how many UV tiles you are trying to import or textures you are trying to import, and it automatically combines everything and has creates as one single map. So now if in case if you want to apply this onto the ground, a simple way what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a folder, or rather than creating a folder, I can on new fill layer, I can make this as ground and make sure to do a mask. I'll just go to this mask. I will exclude everything and I will only enable those ground. So now you can see I have only enabled those ground. Rest everything is actually black. So that's how you will know that what you have masked and what it is not masked. And also you have a nice looking symbol here, 8, and also those UV tiles symbol. So now all I have to do is just go select a material. Since I have base color, I will just drag and drop right on top of this base color. And for the height, I will just drag and drop onto the height. And for the roughness, drag and drop right on top of this roughness. So that's simple it is. If you have multiple sequence of textures to be applied on UV tiles, you can import it in one go and everything will be combined in by Substance Painter. All you have to do is just drag and drop once, not multiple times for each UV tiles. So that way you can save a lot of time if you want to apply this textures for multiple UV tiles. So now our scene is pretty much completed, but I would like to add some more tiny details. For example, these rocks are looking nice, but I wanted to add some other tiny details on top of this. So what I mean by tiny details is basically I wanted to add some lichen or some decals right on top of this. So recently we also released something called wrap feature. So in order to demonstrate that, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get one of the decal here. So there is a lichen here. So what I'm going to do, I will just drag and drop here. Again, while dragging and dropping, I don't want to apply this on all the UV tiles. So rather than doing a mask, I will just hold control and I will only apply on the specific color ID. So now that particular decal or the lichen what we have applied is actually affecting only this particular rock. And also to make use of recent warp feature, so what we can do is we can come to this UV projection mode. So now it is actually in the UV projection. So once we split my view, you can see here we have a UV projection mode. Of course, we can actually make changes for that position at any point of time. Rather than using UV projection, if you are not happy with that, you can of course use a triplanar projection, planar projection, which was already present. Recently, we also added cylindrical projection and also warp projection. So this is very interesting thing. Like for example, if I switch to this warp projection, so what happens is like I will get a warp feature. So now what I'm going to do, I will just enable the surface tool. I will just drag. So let's give that a few seconds. It is actually saving. The autosave is enabled, so it is trying to save my file. Right, so it is saved. So now what happens is I will just move this right on top of this particular surface, and let us increase. I'm not sure like why I'm not able to see. Probably let's switch back to UV projection. Let's do that again. So let's drag and drop right there. Okay. I will exclude everything and only enable this. And we'll go to warp projection. And let's decrease the size. All right. Select the surface tool. Move around on top of the surface. Probably we can scale this down more. All right. This lichen is looking nice. Now we can make use of this warp projection. So basically, like whenever you're trying to do some texturing for characters, it will be much more useful and also nicer. For example, now I have just rotated this and made some changes. Here you can see the projection is actually not happening in a nicer way. So in order to tackle this, what we have done is we have added this transform warp. So you can actually add some vertices and edit some vertices. So for example, I will just split warp crosswise. So what I can do is I can just add some, points over here to just make some modifications. So what I'm going to do is I'm quickly going to add a few more here. All right. So now I will just go to this edit vertices and I can select those specific vertices and make some changes and project it exactly the way we want. So this is what a recently added feature in Substance Painter. It is highly requested feature in VFX industry and also some other industry. And it is very useful when you're doing the texturing work for objects. Like you can actually warp around in 3D space, like not just a small 2D warp. It actually work in a 3D space in much more nicer way. Because you can do some modifications like rotate, scale, everything could be done over here. So let us warp it a little more. We'll just make some small modifications here to this. You can see it is actually going out of the focus area. What I can do is just bring up. Let's move that a little more. Zoom out, and that looks fine. So this way we can actually make use of this warp feature inside Substance Painter. So of course, if you want to add multiple lichens, just all you have to do is just duplicate it, use the surface tool, and move around a little bit. I will just also try to scale this up, down. Right, looks fine. Let me rotate it a bit. Select the surface tool, move around. This time I will just go to edit vertices, a little more adjustments here and there. All right, that looks fine. Few more small adjustments. That works fine. So now since we have actually used the decals from my library, so even this decals are actually a procedural material. So for example, here lichen is there. And also if you're not happy with the color, all you have to do is just go ahead and change the color for that lichen. And it works absolutely nice. So of course you can make some changes to the roughness, or you can also randomize it, duplicate a couple of times, move around, and let's randomize it and probably change the color a little bit. Right. So this way we can actually add those tiny details, make use of those features what we have for in Substance Painter to texture the scene. So far, so good. So what we have done is we have textured the simple scene, which is available here, what I have created. So even before exporting the textures, what I would like to do is I would like to visualize things like how it is actually turning out. So in order to see how this actually looks, I would also use some iRay render, which is inbuilt render inside Substance Painter. So I can actually move around the camera. If you have imported the model with the camera, all I have to do is just go and select those cameras. It will give you a proper view, and you can switch between the cameras to visualize what exactly you are looking at. So once you're happy with the scene, once you feel that everything is fine, of course you can export the textures. But there are much more things over here. Like whenever you're working on the rendering stuff, you can of course add some tiny bit of details like post production, like post effects. It may be color correction, it may be some glare, or anything else that can be added inside the Substance Painter. So that's like if you want to quickly render it out for a portfolio, you can of course do it right inside Substance Painter, and also the rendering time is much more on the lower end. If, of course, you can go and select what time you want to render also. So that's why I will just visualize before actually exporting the textures. Once I am happy, only then I can actually decide exporting these textures. So while exporting the textures, you could see to export it is very pretty straightforward. File, export textures, and here you will get a window. So here you can see scene underscore empty. That is a texture set what we have. So in the scene, I just had one single texture set. So that's the reason I have only one selection over here. If you have multiple texture sets, you will have multiple texture sets. And inside the multiple texture sets, you will have all the UV tiles. For example, in this scene underscore empty, that is one single texture set what I have. And if I scroll down, I have all those UV tiles which are actually textured. So we actually revamped the whole UI for the export in order to adapt the UV tiles workflow. So there are quite a few changes you guys might be aware of, but I would like to stress a little bit on this one. So first of all, like we are trying to make this export feature much more intelligent. The team is actually working. For example, so now since we have actually textured all the UV tiles, it is good to go. You don't need to decide what has to be exported. Substance Painter automatically selects everything. What if in case if you have not textured the ground, apart from ground, all the other asset is textured, but you want to manually go and deselect this ground. So that is a hassle, right? So we are trying to add more features like this, ease of experience. Like for example, Substance Painter will automatically understand what you have textured or what you have not textured. So if there is no data to export, then it might deselect by default. So those are the improvements we are trying to work. And also you can see here, we have dig down into deep. So now you can select and deselect the texture set as well as UV tiles, which has to be exported. And also you can decide on the resolution. For example, if this is a document size, if you want to overwrite, we can actually overwrite. You can export it till 8K. And if you have specific preset or specific template, you of course you can go and select that UV tiles workflow preset, and you can actually export that according to your requirement. So, but I'm going to use that in the default mode. And also here we have, like I said, we have dig deep inside. So every texture, every channel, for example, base color or metallic, everything can be modified. For example, if you want to export this base color in 16-bit, you can go ahead and select in 16-bit. Or if you're not happy with the format, you can go and make some changes. So this way you have control on each channel which has to be exported, as well as texture sets, as well as UV tiles. So that is the level of detail or access you have to decide what to export, or what format or what resolution you wanted to export. So coming to other tabs over here, so output templates. So for example, we have a lot of templates here. For example, if you go to this UV ray next UDIMs, so here again, this is also a template which is used for UDIMs. So specifically, if in case if you want to create your own preset, of course you can do it. So all you have to do is just create your own preset here and make according to your requirement. You can use any channels what you wanted to export, and you can also set what format it has to be. Like if it has to be grayscale or RGB or split RGB with alpha, you can make a decision on that one. So that way we can actually make your own preset. So list of exports. So here, so interestingly, like before exporting, I wanted to make a decision if whatever I have selected is in the right way, the naming conventions is in the right way or not. So once you come to this list of export, you can see here 189 textures will be exported, and also each texture sets will actually show specific naming convention. So for example, here we have selected the texture set name underscore base color underscore the UV tile number. So if in case if you want to make some modifications, you can of course create your own template and naming convention, and you can get rid of this default naming convention and have a specific naming convention. So once you review all those naming conventions, how many textures has to be exported, you can of course save the settings and go ahead and hit the export. So once you export, what happens is, like, no matter what resolution you have worked in, for example, if you have worked in 1K and if you're trying to export your whole project in 4K, Substance Painter works absolutely fine. So for example, what I'm going to do is I'm going to uncheck everything. I'm just going to enable probably like first 8 texture sets over here. Just hold shift drag, it will enable everything. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select the where it has to be exported. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go here and call export, select that folder, and I'm happy with all the settings. I can actually change the whole export settings to 4K and hit export. So as soon as I hit export, what Substance Painter does is it actually calculates each and every actions what we have made, the strokes what we have painted, and it automatically upscales from 2K from a document resolution to export resolution, and it exports it for you. And also the process is much more faster when compared to the older versions of Substance Painter. So that way we can actually leverage the Substance Painter of features like smart masks, UV tiles workflow, warp feature which we added recently, and also some nice user experience inside to work for VFX. So that's all I had for the session. So the quick way to work on Substance Painter using tips and tricks using the Substance Painter. Thank you so much for joining.
Kirtan,
Yes.
thank you for that demo. While you were texturing the tree asset and you were showing us the Udemy workflows, there was actually a question where
Yeah.
someone asked is, when we reuse the asset, will the size be fixed or do we have to resize it manually? I'm not sure if this is out of context for you now, but it was something you were showing while you were texturing the tree.
Okay, when we reuse it, will it be fixed with the size or do we resize it? I really didn't get the question. I cannot understand the question. Probably, if he's talking about the size of an element or an object, 3D object, like it remains as it is, how it was created. So for example, this tree element, rocks, everything was created in other 3D application. So the size of those things will always remain same. If he's talking about the texture size, so since we are non-destructive workflow, so no matter what texture resolution you use, for example, while painting a brush stroke here, so everything will be calculated mathematically. So if I'm working in a document size like 1K, and if I paint a stroke, it may not look nicer. If you upscale the resolution to 4K, since the stroke is procedurally created, so mathematical functions kicks in, and in the back end, it actually gives a stroke in a nicer way. It automatically upscales the resolution. It doesn't blur it out or rasterize it. So it actually works in nicer way. So if you're using the textures, which is of 1K, for example, I bought some of the textures to use it on this ground. If you have imported these textures of which is of 1K resolution, and if the document size goes up by 4K, then since your source is 1K, the Substance Painter will not do anything. So to tackle this, always use procedural materials, what we have in our library. It is procedurally created. At any point of time, you can upscale it and downscale it, scale the resolution. Hope that answers the question.
I
Not sure,
think that
but I
does. I
tried
think
to.
that does answer the question. Uh, yeah. So I guess that's it from our session for today. I thank everyone for joining, and please go through some of the handouts present right here, or at the Adobe stall. You can go through some of the beautiful use cases that we have with some of the VFX studios across the globe, and you can see how Substance is being used daily by millions of artists in the VFX space across the world. Thank you once again for joining, and wish everybody a great day and a great weekend ahead.
Thank you all
Thank,
for joining. Have a good day ahead. Bye bye.
thank you, Kirtan.